I think a lot of creativity can start with something small. It can be with a pencil, it can be with a toy, uh, it can be with something like an old video camera. And this is what happened to me. It was the early 2000s. My grandfather had this old JVC. Well, at the time it was new, but now it's kind of old. This JVC film camera with those small little cassettes, and he would let me use it sometimes and film, little things with it. And that was really how I got into, making small films and videoing, way before YouTube existed. When we would go out and go like on vacations with my family, my grandfather would have his camera. We went to Wyoming one time, and he would sometimes film these long 10-minute like film scenes of landscapes, and he would say like 2 words or three, one sentence, a short sentence. Um, that was all his narration was, but it was something special, uh, capturing a time in our life, and uh, I remember being fascinated with being able to see the camera, hold the camera, and it was like my introduction into this world of filmmaking, of making videos, home videos, and it inspired so much creativity in me. Now, sometimes he would let me use it, and I remember the awe I had because it was a piece of technology, and I love technology. And as a kid, I thought, wow, this is special that my grandfather is letting me use it because it wasn't a cheap thing, it was pricey, especially for the time. So I would like film, I forget even what I would film here and there in my first times using it. Um, but I would learn how to zoom, and I didn't really know it at the time, but I was learning how to not just look through the lens or the viewfinder, but how to focus, how to um, draw the viewer's attention to something. And this was, my creative start in making videos. Along this time, I was living part of the year in Ecuador in South America. And so whenever my grandfather and grandmother would come down from the States to Ecuador, they would sometimes or mostly bring their camera. And along in that time, I would use it. Um, and I learned more about it, how to use the cassettes, how to use the SD card. And in this time, I found that I could not just watch movies, but I could make my own little movies. And this was really inspiring. The thought of, wow, I want to make my own movie. I was really into Jurassic Park, the old movies from the 80s or 90s, and then the old Godzilla movies from the, what, I don't know, 70s maybe, that looked somewhat fake. But I was into that. My dad and I would watch those movies, and I finally said, I want to make a movie like this of my own. So each year I would go back to Ecuador, and we would fly on a plane, and so there was the Sky Mall magazine, which is now gone, out of production. But I would flip through the magazine on the plane, and there was this section of toys and stuff, and there was this remote control T-Rex dinosaur, and I was hooked on it. I was like, I'm gonna buy this, and so I saved up my money for half a year. I talked my grandmother into helping me pay for it. It was only $49, but for me at the time, especially as a kid, it was a lot of money. So eventually, they bought it for me and took it down to Ecuador when they went to visit. Um, and also, I planned out my movie I wanted to make because it was tied in to me wanting to make a movie. So I kind of had loosely inspired my ideas off of Jurassic Park and Godzilla, and I wanted it to look real, not just like a bunch of random footage stuck together. I wanted it to look like a real world, and it was kind of my start of my wild ideas that I got my family into. So at the house where I lived in Ecuador, it was very tropical. It's on the coast of Ecuador. So what I did was I dug a hole. I had this little play area where I would play in the yard, in the garden. Anyways, I dug a hole. I filled it with cement on the edges and like making a little pond. And I planted ferns and other tropical shrubs around it. And there was a trench nearby, near that area, where the washing machine water would drain into this hole. So all of this was like a pond and a little river, and I really wanted this to look like a Jurassic era um, little uh, set, if you will. So I had this all planned out, and in my imagination, it looked like a real world where dinosaurs could live. And I think this is one of the parts that I remember the most, not just, filming or having the toy or having the camera, but building. So building the set, building the creative side of it. I hold these memories very close to my heart of working in the hot afternoons in the yard and building up my little set, my little area for my movie. So once my grandparents got to Ecuador for their visit with my toy dinosaur, I had already planned out the whole script. I had my family help me. They would narrate the different characters. I had these little Lego minifigures, and I put them, I think, on straws or little sticks, and had them do the little things, along with the dinosaur. And I had a radio, and I played the music from Jurassic Park in the background. So it had like dinosaur, or the dinosaur made sounds. It made sounds. Had a little speaker inside, so it would growl. And I filmed this whole thing. I also made a area like a city with a backdrop that I drew by hand. And then I made a bridge, and I made buildings out of the blocks from a Jenga set. So I just made this whole scene and this whole movie with my family's help. And so it was very simple, it was very homemade, but in my mind, it was an entire production, So there was the jungle scene, there was the city scene, there was the characters, there was the dinosaur, there was a story. And that really became my first movie. And like I said, this was in the, early 2000s, and I didn't really have any software, editing software. So what we did was I had to hook up the video camera with the little mini cassette into our TV, and then kind of splice it together, recording it onto a VHS. And I don't remember all the details, but somehow I spliced it together. I also made these pages of like paper with titles, filmed those and spliced those in. So that was really how I made the editing before any of this software like Final Cut and Premiere or whatever else people use. So it wasn't smooth, it wasn't professional, but I had made my first movie, and that was like really special, really creative, and it was so much fun, and it was a very unique and special time for me. As simple as it was, as rudimentary as it was, it taught me you don't need all this fancy tools and equipment just to have fun. And that was the point. It wasn't to make money. It wasn't to get all this fame or anything. It was just me as a kid making this simple movie using the tools that I had, my toy dinosaur, the video camera, my little location settings I made with, cement and Jenga sets. It was about the imagination, and that was enough. Talking a minute about the script, at this time I was homeschooled, and I really didn't like school or learning, but I enjoyed writing short stories about my pet parakeets. So my mom got me to write, well, it was my idea, but I wrote the script to the dinosaur movie uh, with in homeschool. And so that's one way that my mom kind of got me to be creative and do, I guess you might say, creative writing in school was by letting me or allowing me to write things that I really wanted to write and that interested me. So there was the connection happening. I was writing, I was imagining, I was creating, I was building these little worlds. I was imagining and creating these characters for my stories, for my films. And I was trying to kind of bring these worlds together. So the dinosaur movie wasn't just about filming, it was about storytelling, it was about characters, it was about, life, and it was it was about trying to make something imaginary from the kid's imagination feel real. And so nowadays, I think this part of me is very much still with me, the creative side, the storytelling side, the imagination side. It's different now. I've matured, I'm different, but it remains with me. It pushes me to now make these YouTube videos and also videos for online classes that I teach. The tools have changed a lot. Um, the I have my iPhone I use for filming. I use my MacBook for editing. I have my lights. So I've come a long ways. I've learned about lighting. I've learned about editing. I still have a lot to learn. I'll tell you that much. I have a lot to learn. Um, but from where I was when I was a kid, I look at this progress, this timeline, and how things I learned then, and even unconsciously or subconsciously, had a real impact on my life. This is what I think I loved about making movies as a kid. It wasn't really about making something perfect. It was about being creative, being able to film something, edit it. It's hard to really put words to it, but I find a thrill to it, it's fun, it's a creative outlet. Looking back, these were my foundations for my creativity. The writing, the filming, the editing, the problem solving, being able to take nothing and create something of it, if you will. And that was really, I guess, what is the foundation for every artist. And honestly, I think it's a major part, it's a big part of being a creative, of being an artist. You don't always have a perfect setup, you don't always have a perfect lighting or perfect tools, but you do what you can, you create, you have an outlet for your creativity. At the time, you don't always know what you're doing. You're filming, you're creating, you're storytelling. Maybe you're unaware of it, but years later you could look back and say, wow, that contributed to so much of my creativity. That's where I started. And you look back and you're like, those basic things that I did back then have made me who I am today. They continue, and that's why I continue to make movies. I continue to want to be creative, to upload on the YouTube, even though maybe I miss some weeks or some days, but I have this urge, this drive to be creative and make videos. But anyways, enough of me talking. That's been it for today. Hope you have a great day. I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.